Today's video is sponsored by NordVPN with a special Black Friday deal you don't want to miss. There is a new fear sweeping the aviation industry. For many decades, there was a fear of technical or mechanical problems with airplanes leading to deadly crashes. Then, a rise in terrorism saw fears of hijackings or worse. As the pandemic brought the aviation industry to a standstill, these fears were largely left in 2020, making room for a new type of in-flight danger. 2021 saw a 30-fold increase in the number of attacks. The difference this time is that the attacks are being committed by regular people, and it's wreaking havoc.
This morning, flight attendants are describing the verbal abuse and violence they face on the job.
It's called air rage. It's like road rage, but on a plane.
The FAA is warning of a rise in disruptions on planes and at airports across the country.
Get me off this goddamn plane!
This is the story of the rise of in-flight attacks. The rise of air rage. What is air rage? Well, it's disruptive or violent behavior on the part of passengers and crew of aircraft, especially during flight. Looking around the world, it's pretty clear that this problem is worst in the United States. Flying domestically hasn't been luxurious for decades, but at least it was relatively safe until recently. Flight attendants could come to their jobs expecting decent treatment from passengers, and passengers knew that the worst that could happen was usually some drunk millennials talking loudly on their way to Cabo.
Party with the best of them.
In 2019, the FAA opened 146 investigations into passenger behavior, but something has clearly changed. In 2021 alone, there have suddenly been thousands of so-called air rage incidents. These incidents range from passengers yelling at crew or their seat neighbors to in-flight sexual assault, all the way to physically assaulting cabin crew. Obviously, the perpetrators are serious security threats if they're walking around harassing cabin crew, or worse yet, damaging aircraft equipment. So many times, airlines choose to divert and offload the passenger. In turns, this leads to delays, not only for those on board, but for people waiting for the next flight that will be served by the same aircraft. Many passengers on board are left with trauma, they may even have been assaulted themselves, and the crew are most certainly traumatized and some are injured. These horrifying incidents should not become the norm when flying. So what is causing them? In case you missed it, there was an election in 2020, leading to a change in US leadership at the start of 2021. This also resulted in several laws aiming to enforce the politics of this new government. There are primarily two that have heavily impacted the rise in air rage. The first is the Biden administration's federal mask mandate, and to showcase just how significant this law is in causing air rage, of the nearly 5,000 air rage incidents reported this year, 3,500 were related to mask usage. A staggering 70% of these dangerous onboard encounters have resulted from a law that was intended to protect people and their health. I'll discuss the other law later in the video, but on a higher level, we could say the rise in air rage is a result of increased polarization as a whole, especially in the US, which manifests itself in the debate on masks. Some people are happy to wear them while others feel that masks are being pushed on them, leading to discontent and sometimes anger. This is all exaggerated by the stress of air travel, which seems to always bring out the worst in people. Poor flight attendants working in this environment. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I am a harsh critic of in-flight service in the US, but you have to admire people who have enough passion for their jobs to continue showing up at work despite the possibility of having some dude punch you in the face. That sort of makes you want to quit your job, right? But Dan, surely with 5,000 incidents, it's still quite rare, right? There are thousands of flights every day in the US alone. Well, those are incidents that reached the FAA. In July, a survey of US flight attendants revealed that 85% had experienced unruly passengers this year. That's almost like there being 100 people in a room and only one flight attendant believes in you because they haven't been assaulted, and that flight attendant happens to be Bradley Cooper. More than half of flight attendants reported experiencing more than 5 incidents this year. Even worse, 1 in 5 had experienced physical incidents. Who can continue like this? Unfortunately, this creates a feedback loop, which makes incidents even more frequent and even worse. Let's see why. Bring on the Great Resignation. As if the pandemic didn't bring us enough horrors, empty toilet paper aisles, accelerated global supply shortages, and the new Cinderella movie,
This is gorgeous!
it also brought the Great Resignation. Basically, companies can't find employees because for some reason, people don't want to work their asses off 10 hours a day for $8 an hour without healthcare benefits while the guy at the top of the food chain flies to space. People are quitting their jobs everywhere, most of them hoping to become TikTok famous or post foot pics on OnlyFans. So in an industry where 85% of people have experienced unruly customers and a fifth have been assaulted, the Great Resignation shouldn't come as much of a surprise. On a different note, you know what would be a surprise? If I managed to hit my goal of 500,000 subscribers this year, which would allow me to bring 3 of you on a free flight in Qatar Airways Q Suite. Please help me out by hitting that button. Could be one of the lucky viewers who gets to come with me next year. So people are quitting, cutting down on hours, or refusing invitations to come back if they have been on leave. And the truth is, airlines ain't no Chipotle down the block. They can't just close unannounced at 2:14 p.m. because the 3 employees remaining are too burnt out to keep folding burritos at superhuman speeds. An airline cannot close due to lack of staff, but you see these issues in other ways. At the start of the pandemic, there were massive incentives for employees to retire early or quit with general severance packages, so naturally, the workforces at many airlines shrunk significantly. Okay, cool, but hold on. Travel is resuming, right? Yes, from what felt like 0 to 100, the flying American public went from being locked up in their house obsessing over banana bread to wanting to party in bikinis all over Florida. So airlines were naturally thrilled to see demand pick up and were ready to reactivate their fleets. But wait, what about the staff? The airlines were like, hey, remember me? Yeah, I want you back. Oh, you want me to come back to an exhausting, labor-intensive job with passengers who are potentially carrying a deadly virus and might assault me at any moment? Sign me up! So naturally, this is causing issues. Airlines do not have enough staff to cover demand anymore, and hiring new flight attendants is not only difficult due to the Great Resignation, but training is an expensive and time-consuming process. This means the poor flight attendants who remain need to be pushed to their limits, operating at or over the maximum flying hours stipulated in their contracts to cover for the lack of employees. Think of it like this. It's raining into a bucket and you want to make sure the bucket doesn't overflow. You have a tube that carries out just enough water to keep the water level from changing. But wait, oh my goodness, there's a storm, there's a hurricane. Suddenly rain is pouring into the bucket and it starts to fill above the regular level. The tube can't handle it, but thankfully our bucket is large enough that it can handle this increase in rain temporarily, and the water level eventually drops. Now what happens if we shrink the bucket and push it to the max? Well, our standard water level is almost at the edge of the bucket. It works, but only at a constant level of rain. Bring on a storm and the bucket overflows. There's not enough spare capacity. Well, airlines, especially in the US, are now facing this problem. It's raining like crazy, but they're having trouble expanding the size of their buckets. Instead, they're constantly pushing the limits of what they can handle, and when the slightest thing goes wrong, they, and in turn passengers, are screwed. This labor shortage is the main cause of the mass flight cancellations we've seen over the summer and fall, affecting almost all US airlines at some point. There simply is no room in the flight attendant scheduling systems for any irregularities, meaning crews are timing out and too many flights are being scheduled for the number of available crew. So what happens when you have massive delays, cancellations, disruptions due to lack of staff? Things get even worse. This is our wonderful feedback loop. Passengers cause horrible onboard environments for themselves and staff, leading to flight crews quitting or refusing invitations to come back. Then, schedules are disrupted since there's not enough staff. These disruptions make passengers frustrated and angry, in turn making them more likely to act up and cause in-flight incidents, and it continues. So, what can be done about this? Well, there are two potential solutions, or well, three if you consider the option of never flying again, but that doesn't seem very reasonable. But first, we need to talk about reporting bias. Besides the federal mask mandate, the other law that came into effect right as Biden was inaugurated was a stricter, unruly passenger policy. How could a new law to fight passenger incidents make them worse? Well, this law changes how cases are reported. Previously, passengers could get off with a warning or a civil penalty, while now there is basically zero tolerance for disruption, with fines up to $35,000, and even prison sentences in some cases. This has vastly increased the number of incidents that get reported, thereby to some extent making it seem like there are more incidents now than there were in the past. It's beyond me how this new policy doesn't effectively discourage air rage more than it does, because surely $35,000 is prohibitive enough for most people to watch themselves, but presumably not enough people know that this law even exists. Currently, perpetrators also get banned from the airline where they commit the felony, but there is no list shared between airlines, so it makes it easy for them to just fly another airline next time. Firstly, the law should be more widely advertised on board, possibly in the same way as non-smoking policies.
Smoking is not allowed on any Delta flight.
Secondly, creating a list that's shared between airlines, or perhaps more effectively, adding perpetrators to the no-fly list, would create a truly tough punishment that might make more people think twice. Even then, many people are so enraged that they're beyond thinking of consequences. So how can we prevent them from getting to this mental space to start with? Obviously, minimizing division, both political and social, would help with the mask issue, but that's no small feat. More directly, airlines can choose to ban things that make passengers upset, like bad legroom, uncomfortable seats, old planes, etc. Now, of course, this will never happen, but one thing they can ban is alcohol in order to prevent intoxication. Both Southwest and American have banned the sale of alcohol at least through next year. I'm not quite sure how many incidents this has prevented, but surely it's better than nothing. So there is hope, but unfortunately, air rage is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to a rapidly deteriorating flying experience. Come back in a few weeks to find out what exactly is making airlines perform so badly lately. If you made it this far, take one more minute to learn about something amazing, namely NordVPN. If you like watching shows, whether they're British, American, Korean, Indian, Mexican, you name it, you've probably come across a restriction that prevents you from watching it either in your home country or abroad. For example, you like Doctor Who or want to watch it for the first time? Well, the whole show is on BBC iPlayer, which is only available in the UK. Luckily, you can simply use NordVPN to connect to the UK where, ta-da, Doctor Who is now available to you for free. Thanks, NordVPN. Of course, they also protect you online by changing your IP address so no one has access to your browsing information, allowing you to keep your information to yourself. If you want online protection and the ability to watch shows from all over the world on any streaming service or website, I recommend making NordVPN your one-stop shop and signing up at nordvpn.com/nonstopdan or tapping the link at the top of the description. This gets you an amazing 73% off. See you in the next one. Fly safe, guys.